Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating and honestly often overlooked chapter of India's freedom struggle. This was a time when the fight wasn't just against the British, but also a battle of ideas inside the movement itself, and it led to a radical new strategy that pretty much changed everything.
So think about this for a second. What happens when a revolution just stops? That was the exact question hanging over India in the early 1920s. You had this massive, nationwide movement that just came to a grinding halt, and suddenly nobody knew what to do next. It was a moment of crisis that would totally redefine the path to independence.
So to really get this, you have to understand the backdrop. Mahatma Gandhi had just called off the non-cooperation movement. This was a huge campaign of civil disobedience happening all across the country. And right after he calls it off, he gets arrested. This left the entire nationalist movement completely rudderless. No clear leader, no clear plan, just silence. And that, right there, brings us to our first part. A movement in total crisis. This sudden stop just created widespread disappointment and a whole lot of confusion. The promise of freedom? Well, it suddenly felt further away than ever.
So, what does this political vacuum actually mean in real terms? Well, Gandhi had kicked off the movement with this electrifying promise of Swaraj in 1 year. So when he suddenly pulled the plug, all of that hope just fizzled out into uncertainty. With him in prison, there was no vision for what came next. The movement was basically stalled.
Now, out of this crisis, a really fierce debate erupted inside the Indian National Congress. And this led to two very, very different ideas about what to do next, a split that was about to change the whole game.
And this slide lays out the divide perfectly. On one side, you had the pro-changers, also known as the Swarajists, led by guys like C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru. Their radical idea was, hey, let's get inside the British-controlled legislative councils and fight the system from within. But on the other side, you had the no-changers, who were die-hard Gandhians like Vallabhbhai Patel. They were saying, no way, we stick to the plan, boycott those councils, and focus on grassroots constructive work, like spinning khadi and fighting untouchability.
You know, what's so smart about the Swarajist argument is that they weren't saying let's give up. They were saying let's innovate. They argued that getting into the councils was a way to open a totally new front in the battle. It was a proactive move to keep morale high and, crucially, to stop the British from just filling those councils with people loyal to them.
And look, this wasn't some polite disagreement. It was a serious ideological battle. When the pro-changers' idea to enter the councils was voted down at the 1922 Congress session, C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru felt so strongly about it that they did something huge. They resigned and formed their own party, the Swaraj Party.
So, this brings us to the big experiment. This audacious new strategy of fighting from the inside, did it actually work? Let's take a look at what happened when the Swarajists put their plan into motion. Well, the results came in fast, and they were pretty impressive. In the 1923 elections, this brand new Swaraj Party won 42 out of 101 elected seats in the Central Legislative Assembly. I mean, that's a huge chunk. It gave them a real official platform to challenge the government head-on.
But their plan wasn't just to show up and give fiery speeches. No, it was a very clever, systematic strategy of obstruction. Once they were elected, their whole goal was to create deadlock. They'd block government proposals, vote down budgets, basically make it impossible for the British bureaucracy to get anything done, forcing the government to pay attention.
And they had some real successes. They actually got one of their own, Vallabhbhai Patel, elected as the president, kind of like the speaker, of the Central Legislative Assembly. That's huge. They defeated major repressive laws, like the Public Safety Bill. And all along, they were using their position to expose the so-called British reforms as a total sham.
But then, something happened. An event from the outside that completely changed the political weather in India. The British made a move that was so clumsy, so insulting, that it managed to unite almost every political group in the country, and it put the Swarajist strategy to a massive test.
So, in 1927, the British government appointed something called the Simon Commission. Its job? To recommend the next steps for constitutional reform in India. But there was one tiny problem. As you can see from the protests, it was an all-white, all-British commission. Not a single Indian was included to help decide the future of India.
You have to understand, this wasn't just about not having a seat at the table. This was seen as a deep, fundamental violation of the principle of self-determination. The British were basically saying, loud and clear, that Indians weren't capable of having a say in their own government. It was a deliberate insult, and nobody was going to let it slide.
The reaction was absolutely electric, and it was unified. This mind map gives you a sense of it. Protests just erupted everywhere. You had mass strikes, called hartals, in Bombay. In Lucknow, people got creative and floated kites and balloons with the slogan, "Simon, go back." The entire country was on the same page, shouting the same thing.
So all this outrage over the Simon Commission, combined with the intense political debates that had been brewing all decade, well, it all came together and pushed the nationalist movement toward a brand new and much, much more radical goal.
And this timeline shows you just how fast things started moving. Indian leaders tried to offer a compromise with the Nehru Report, proposing dominion status, basically self-rule within the British Empire, but it didn't get enough support. Younger, more radical leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose thought it was too soft. Then, when the British Viceroy flat-out rejected their demands, the stage was set for a massive shift.
So you see, the attempt at finding a middle ground had failed. The energy on the streets, especially among the youth, was pushing for something bigger. It became crystal clear that the old goal of just having some limited self-rule wasn't going to cut it anymore. The movement needed a new, powerful, and totally clear objective. And this was the result. At the Lahore Congress session in December 1929, the party declared its new, non-negotiable goal, Purna Swaraj, or complete independence. The next month, on January 26, 1930, this incredible pledge was read out across the entire nation. The message was clear. The time for negotiation was over. India must sever all ties with Britain.
So the Swarajists had successfully kept the political fire burning through a tough decade, and the Simon Commission had united the country in anger. It all led to this powerful new demand for complete and total freedom. But declaring independence is one thing. The massive question that now faced India was, how do you actually achieve it? And that question would set the stage for the next, even bigger phase of the freedom struggle.